Hi, good morning. Ed here from Crystal Clear Aquatics. Beautiful day, lovely spring day, and the start of another project. Today hails the beginning of another pond restoration, and this is the reline of a pond that I've serviced for many years in Hampshire, beautiful village called Hawkley. Pond's looking very sorry for itself. It's really not holding very much water. There's some livestock in the pond that desperately need to be rehoused. So let me show you what we're going to be doing. I think ponds always look so sorry for themselves when they're half empty, and you can see this one really is not holding very much water at all. For quite a long time my clients here have had to dribble permanently water from the tap just to try and maintain a suitable level for the fish. Obviously that's not ideal at all. You can see there's a few goldfish in there. There's not a lot. It's essentially a natural pond, a lot of weed, a lot of plant growth, and it's been a very, very healthy environment. Huge amounts of frogs and toad spawn during the spring months. Thankfully we seem to have timed it a little bit early, and there hasn't yet been any spawn. I'm just looking now. That's appeared in the pond. Otherwise I'd have to be very, very careful in looking after that. It's in a lovely setting, this pond, surrounded by beautiful Hampshire countryside. We're here in Hanger country, in a beautiful village, as I say, Hawkley near Selborne, and it's surrounded by some lovely, lovely countryside. Now this area, not so long ago actually, was quite overshaded with some trees that have been taken out. So in the last few years, the dynamics of this pond have really changed, and I'm quite excited that once we get this relined and restored to its former glory, it's going to become a lovely pond. Now, in the process of restoring this, obviously all of the stonework around the edge, there's some bits of concrete holding the edge of the liner in place around here. That's all going to have to be removed. A lot of the planting that's overhanging in the way, all of this begonia, that's going to have to come out. And there's an old cascade here as well, and it would be really nice to get that fully restored. I think once upon a time it used to go back quite far. There was a problem with some leaking, so the pipework has been shortened to create just a final spill at the front here. And I'd like to restore that and build a nice cascade. It's got a perfect position for that, a nice natural elevation and a good drop, so that will be ideal. The whole place is surrounded by wild garlic here. It's going to be in bloom very soon, and it's going to smell lovely. We've got Dave on the scene, the A-team back together as always. This is the only team. If you're looking for a job and you want to work in the aquatics industry, hit me up with a comment. Look at that for a view though. South Downs in the distance. I think this is one of the nicest gardens that I come and visit. Absolutely beautiful. Despite the sunshine, it's a little bit chilly, so I need to get active so I can warm up a little bit. It's not chilly. Apparently it's not chilly. Now this pond has obviously been here for many years, and there's an awful lot of growth that's established itself around the edges of the pond. A lot of this I want to try to maintain and to hang on to. I mean, there's lots of lovely heart-tongue ferns and other various ferns that have sort of self-seeded and planted amongst the stonework. And it's stuff like that that I'll put back once the pond is established and the cascade has been built, that will help to create the illusion that this pond has been here for a lot longer than it has been. It's quite exciting actually. As I'm pulling away a lot of the plants, I'm discovering more and more stonework. You never would have known initially that this cascade went so far back when it was overgrown as it was. And there's some lovely, lovely stones, some lovely materials here to work with. I've got a lovely slab of York stone here, which is going to create a nice spill stone for a cascade. So already as I'm taking this apart, my mind is starting to tick and whir with ideas for what we can do to put everything back. It's a shame that a lot of this surrounding growth in certain areas is going to get trampled on. That's inevitable, but this early on in the spring it's not going to be any permanent damage, and it'll all come back through again once we finish the job. I'd like to think that when we come back in the summer to have a look and see how it's doing, everything will have re-established itself. There won't be any scars left from our work, and it will look like the pond has been here for many years. Now, despite the shallow appearance of this pond, it's teeming with fish, lots and lots of fish. Over the years, the heron has taken a lot of the brightly coloured ones, and it's left the brown fish, and I can even see some rudd, which makes it very difficult for us because, of course, the fish aren't very colourful and they're not very easy to spot. We're trying to be very careful as we drain the pond out using the vacuum rather than a pump, so we can see exactly what we're sucking up and not stir up the pond too much. But as the pond level is dropping, exposing more and more ground and weed, there's a lot of fish that are floundering around. So Dave is going around picking them up and doing his rescue job. Quite a lot of silt in there, isn't there?
Yeah, still too, yeah, there is a bit.
That's all going to have to come out.
It's the baby ones I'm going to worry about.
Well, good luck. Down to the sloppy bit now, and look at that, showing my farmer's tan. First day of the year getting my vest on. So lots of muck. This is all got to come out. Dave has painstakingly been removing baby rudd, which is what we've got in here. Tiny little things, so we've got a lovely shoal of them reserved and a few adult goldfish. Lots of newts and frogs and various bits and pieces. Taking a huge scoop of muck and the weed and taking that off to a holding tank as well, so that we can make sure we reclaim lots and lots of the original pond life to go back in and seed the pond when it's refilled. But now it's the mucky bit. Some time ago, Paul from Owaza offered us a loan of a very industrial pond vacuum to try out. Yeah. If you're listening, Paul, I should have borrowed it. Thank you. Are you chuckling to yourself? Because I'm making it appear that I'm doing some work. But everyone knows that it was you that did it. So, empty, clean-ish pond. That's all the mud out. Next stage is to break up this huge island of yellow flag iris and water lily. But before we do that, it's lunchtime. What's on the menu today, Dave?
Cheese and chutney.
Very nice. It's a nice spot for some lunch, isn't it? Day 2 on the job. Yesterday was a day spent clearing, draining the pond, getting rid of all of the bits and pieces inside and removing all of the stonework and edging so that we could access all of the lining. It's a big mess at the moment to deal with. Looks like a big pond, doesn't it, now it's been fully emptied?
It certainly does.
It's been a very well formed shell, so it's a concrete pond. I knew there was going to be concrete around the edges, but actually it appears that the entire shell has been formed and skimmed with a layer of concrete, so we've got a nice firm foundation on which to put the new lining. Now once we've moved the stonework from the pond, we've got a couple of big brutes that we need to hoik out of the way. I want to get my tripod and lasers set up in the centre of the pond and get an idea of the levels all the way around. I think it's been formed pretty well, but it doesn't look completely level, and I think some areas of the pond behind the camera here particularly look a lot higher, and I want to make sure that when we put the new lining in and we've edged it with stonework, that there is a small amount of stone all the way around which starts from below the surface of the water, so that we lose that visible strip of pond lining. So we probably will have to end up marking and scoring a line on the concrete and then getting the disc cutter out and just cutting away a small section so that we can create and form a shelf. But first of all, let's get limbered up and move away some of these rocks. It is a bit heavy. So, let's get this bit cleared out. All of this loose rubble and soil and stuff that's fallen in, we'll take it out. And then we can neaten up the edging. And then we'll get the laser out on it. Agreed? So we're at the stage now where we're gauging levels for the pond. And I have to say that they're all over the place on this pond. There's a substantial slope in this direction. And it's quite misleading until you get the laser and really get an idea of exactly where these levels are. The eye can be deceiving. So what I want to ensure is that all of the edge of the pond, all of the visible strip of liner at the surface is concealed by a little bit of water above the stonework. Now originally the pond liner came up over here, and for a large portion of this pond it was just capped off with a bit of curved concrete. It was functional, it held the top of the lining down, but it aesthetically didn't look very nice at all. And because the pond wasn't level, there was always a large amount of pond liner exposed all around the edges. And actually from a durability point of view, having that amount of liner exposed to UV is really going to compromise the lifespan of that particular bit of pond liner. The UV can damage the lining and can cause welds and seals to go and to compromise it. So I want to make sure that none of that is visible. So we've got the laser out. It's rigged up on a tripod over here, currently switched on. And this is now projecting a level beam of light, uniform, all over quite a large area. Now we can't see it. It's one of those days where you're actually praying that it's overcast and rainy, because you can visibly see the red line. But if you can't see it, then with the use of a receiver, once that catches the laser beam, here we go, it will beep and tell me whether I need to go up or down, and when I get a uniform fixed tone, that's the line. And I can use this against some form of vertical tool. You can get a proper measure stick with a laser, but you can also just use a level. I don't need to be amazingly accurate here, submersed beneath a few inches of water. If we've got, you know, a discrepancy of half an inch or so, that's not going to be a problem. So what I've done is I've worked out where the lowest point of the pond is, which is over here at this sort of hard standing, and I can't have maximum water level any higher than the lowest point of the pond, not without then having a raised section of the pond, which we don't want to do. So water level is going to end up being at maximum here. And there are a few areas around the pond where the ground goes higher, but based on this, if this is going to be the maximum water level, and I want to ensure that we've got a few inches of submersed stone concealing that strip of liner, then I need to create a rock shelf or an edging shelf 4 or 5 inches lower than the maximum water line. So using the levels and the laser, we've gone round and we've marked a little scoring all the way around the pond here now. And it's just about visible. We've done this section all around here, all the way around here. And now with the disc cutter, all of this is going to get cut out so that we can create a nice level uniform flat shelf onto which the stonework is going to start. Now the other side of the pond, which was predominantly great big blocky boulder pieces of stone, there's not really any concrete so much that needs to be cut out, but it's just directly on top of earth, and that will have to be dug down a little bit to ensure that those rocks are also submerged underwater. So we'll get the disc cutter out now. Quite a bit of work to do, a lot of rubbish to get rid of and a lot of stuff to clear, but at least we've got a plan and a line and a guide to work with. That's breaking away nicely. How's it going, Dave? Hard work? I'm pooped.
Yeah, that's all done.
That's good. So we need to get the spade out and start digging out that soil in a bit. Very good, it's coming on. Is that not one of the nicest views you've seen from a house? Absolutely gorgeous. I've always had a soft spot for the South Downs. As many years ago I walked a lot of it and wild camped with my wife up in the hills over there. Very, very nice. So it is another day on the job. Day 3, and we are at a position where we can now think about dropping the new pond liner into the pond. All of the edging shelf has been dug and established. I'm going to get the laser out before the liner goes in just to make sure that we're pretty accurate, but I guess we're within about an inch or so of being level all the way around, which is absolutely fine. It's a heavy old liner. It's going to be about 130 kilos, so just about on the limit of what Dave and I will manage together. But it would be nice to get the liner in and see some water going into this. So we've got the laser rigged up on this little tripod over here, and we're just very quickly going around with our little stick and receiver to gauge and make sure that the shelf that we've cut out is level. Because if we don't do it now, it's too late once we put the pond liner in. Got to turn my stick the right way around. Very, very handy piece of kit, having a laser when you're trying to gauge levels over a big area like this. Could not be without it. So we are pretty good. We're within about an inch all the way round, which is absolutely fine. So this is the highest point, I think. No, that's great. It's even less than an inch out, I think. Excellent. So we're going to leave the pond liner and the fleece in place, and we're going to run a new fleece over the top of this and the main pond liner over the top of that. Get some water in the pond, and then we can give it its cursory kind of first trim to get rid of the bulk of the excess. And I should imagine that's probably all we'll manage today, and then we'll let it settle over the weekend and we can start building next week. as you can see, pond liner's in. We've put the heavy duty pond fleece down first, and that's to protect obviously the main pond liner from punctures and roots and bits and pieces from beneath. And then a very heavy pond liner has gone over the top. This is a green seal rubber, a 1mm, heavier duty, so slightly thicker than standard. As I say, it weighed about 130 kilos, so it was quite a heavy piece. A rubber liner like this is nice and durable and flexible and very supple. Comes with a 30-year warranty, although it should outlive that if it's been installed correctly and you've not got any exposed liner shown to UV light. So we're now at the stage of adding some water. Now, you probably saw from the time lapse, having pulled the pond liner out and tried to get rid of as many creases and folds and bits and pieces from the flat depth of the pond, we've put a few stones holding the pond liner in place. And we're now going to put a bit of water into the pond, a foot or so, to add some weight to the liner to hold it in place so we can then start to pull away some of the creases from the edges. So Dave, if you want to switch the pump on. Now I'll add, normally I'd be in the pond in a pair of shorts and barefoot, or a pair of Crocs, those wonderful things. Not. But it's a bit cold. Most of this is tap water straight out of the tap, and it's a little bit too chilly at this time of year for me to do that. So I'm in my waders, but it's very important that you check the cleats and the grips and the soles of your shoes to make sure you haven't picked up any bits of grit or stone that could damage the liner when you're walking around in it. Filling. This is the exciting part of this, because we know now we're at the stage of rebuilding. Now, as you're filling the pond, it's not just a simple case of sitting back and waiting for it to fill. It's all hands on deck, and constantly there's adjustments and folds and bits and pieces that are being done to the pond liner to make sure that it fits as neatly as possible. Now, we've sort of fitted the liner to the hole to ensure that the maximum overlap is at that end of the pond, or the maximum excess of liner is at that end of the pond where the cascade's going to be. So I've got maximum overlap between the new cascade pond liner and the main pond liner underneath, because any excess over here is just going to get cut away and go to waste. So I'm within a couple of inches of being absolutely spot on there, which is great. Or I've got a couple of inches over. Now, there's always going to be folds and creases in a pond. It's inevitable, and the more informal and sort of curvy the shape, the more curves you're going to get. But you can do a few sort of tricks to try and make sure that those folds and creases are as neat as possible. And now we've got a bit of water in the depths in this little pool here in the pond. These creases all around the edge can be manipulated to look a little bit neater. And on the inside edge of a curve like this, with the weight on the main pond liner, if you pull it up, you'll see exactly where it wants to crease. And you've got an option. You can either have sort of big individual folds working your way around the curve, and once this is filled up with water and you've got the weight of the water pushing against this, these folds are not very noticeable. But you can also do a sort of a double gather in a corner. So you're kind of grabbing a bit here and making a fold, and you're grabbing a bit this side and making a fold, and you end up with something like this, which again, with the weight of the water up against that, it's much, much neater and not very noticeable. And what you want to do is to make sure that you hold that nice and secure, and then you put a stone, a brick, something on there just to keep that nice and tight, and then you can continue to fill. And I should be working my way around the pond looking for areas like this where I can make a gather, make a nice neat fold, so that we've got minimal creases. Well, this is always an exciting stage of a pond project like this, seeing the pond filled up. So that's the liner in and the pond filled. We've used up almost entirely our 4,000 gallon holding tank. There's a little bit left in there, but not a lot. So that's all gone in here. All of the surrounding edging shelving is below water level, which is exactly what we needed, so that all of the stonework that's going to start to edge the pond will start off standing in water. So tomorrow's Good Friday, won't be here on site, so the pond's got the weekend to settle down, and then next week we'll come back in, partially drain it, and we'll start to build it. So yesterday was the first day in the job, putting some stonework in and rebuilding the pond and the edging. Now this is using all of the existing stone that was here, a few other odds and sods that we found in the garden, but obviously doing what we've done, we're going to need a lot more stone that was here originally. If you can remember, the beginning of the pond, over this section here, there was a lot of the overhanging begonia which was concealing the liner, and of course that's been pulled back to reveal the liner so that we can replace it. So that's a large section of area that originally hadn't been stoned that we had to find materials for. We've had to make the shelving a little bit deeper so that it sits in water, so that's increased the height of the shelf, and that means we have to have more than one layer of stone in certain sections. So there's a fair bit more material required to complete this. Some of the rocks that came out of this originally were enormous, and trying to put them back between the two of us is very difficult, but we're getting there. So hopefully we get a good day today where we can complete this section, and all this stone is being laid dry so that I can come along once I've redrained the pond, get the foam gun out and use an aquatic foam to secure 90% of this. This front section of stone here is going to become a foundation for a paved patio, so that I want to make sure that it's mortared into place, a little bit of a stronger bond. But all around the rest of the pond, aquatic foam is absolutely fine. It's going to secure the rocks. This sort of area is not going to get walked on, so it's just there to hold the stonework into place. This morning we popped into one of our local suppliers to grab a load more York stone. Dave's currently rinsing that off, as it's always a little bit dusty and dirty. It's a beautiful morning, the birds are out singing, and today we heard our first cuckoo of the season, so that's a great thing to hear. So it's waders on and off we go. Now, one big benefit of building ponds and securing the rock edging using aquatic foam rather than cement is that you can build it dry stone, as we've done here, so you can get an idea of exactly what you're doing, make sure you're happy with the finish before you then secure it into place by squirting foam into all the gaps and joints. And a great bonus of this is that you can of course raise and drop the level of the pond to really get an idea of the levels. So we've got one of our big holding tanks in place. Obviously yesterday when we were building the stone, we were doing so with the shelving exposed above water level. But then before we went yesterday, I wanted to see what it looked like in relation to the depth of the pond. So we were able to fill it up with the reclaimed water, make sure that the stonework, cuckoo, and it stopped. Darn it, we heard our first cuckoo this morning. I'm trying to get it on camera. Where was I? Yes, so we've got the benefit of filling the pond up so we can make sure that the stonework we've positioned around the edge is actually sitting in water. And now I can drain the pond out, back into our holding tank, and we can continue building. Well, we're a couple of days further down the line now, and as you can see, we've put down an awful lot of rock around the pond. Now, actually, it's looking a bit of a mess at the minute. You can probably see all that black muck squidged out from between the rocks, and that's because having laid all the rocks dry, and once I was happy with the position of how they were sitting, I'm now going around and fixing them in place with an aquatic expanding foam. And this is the result of it once it's oozed out of the cracks, looking like the blob's returned. Oh, it's hardening off here. Now this is an area at the back here which is going to formulate the cascade. You can see we've put down the spill stone. This side here is not complete. I'm happy with that stone on the left, but this one on the right here needs a good jiggle and they're going to come out. But this has all been foamed and the area of the foam has been pushed in. I think we'll get some tools on this and manipulate it and push it in just a little bit further and scrape away some of the more visible stuff. But expanding foam works very well in fixing and sort of bonding the rocks together. It's obviously not as strong a bond as a proper mortar joint, but when you're using really heavy, large rocks like this, which are already sitting in a good position and not moving, encapsulating them in an expanding foam which really hardens nicely is a good way of just securing them and making sure they're not going to move. Likewise, there's some very large rocks around here. These have taken a bit of getting into position. Just filling up behind here with various rocks and a bit of foam, and then all of this, which is above waterline, will get filled up with soil and planted up. So all these little cracks and voids between the rocks will eventually green up and look very natural. This front section of shelf here will be mortared into place because this is going to provide a foundation for what will become a patio on top of this, to cover this old concrete hard standing. But otherwise all the rest of this is foamed into position. Now I'm using a Waza foam fix attached to just a generic foam gun. You can use the foam fix comes with a little straw like an aerosol, and you can just use the can individually, but it's not very effective. Much better to use a proper gun like this, and you can be a lot more accurate with squirting and positioning the foam. And then it's a simple job of firing all of this in all the gaps and the cracks. Now this expands massively, so initially don't go too mad with it. Give it 15-20 minutes or so and let it expand, and if you feel like you've got more areas that need to be filled, then go back over it again a second time. Now you get through a lot of this. On this particular job so far, I've got through about 7 cans. I'm probably going to end up using another 4 or 5 to complete this and do the cascade. And they're quite expensive. However, it's an awful lot cheaper in terms of labour costs because it's so much quicker than if I was to do this as a traditional sort of mortared method. I mean, this has taken 2.5 days to put the stone down and another day to fix it. If I was doing this with a cement-based fixative, we'd be laying individual stones at a time with cement, and this is probably going to be 2 weeks' work of laying stonework. So if you're paying somebody else to do it, it ends up being an awful lot cheaper spending a bit more on the foam because it's much quicker in the long run. As I say, there are compromises. This is nowhere near as solid a join as if I was to cement all of this together. I mean, I probably wouldn't be happy skipping and jumping all over these stones like I would if I was pouring concrete behind it. But it's not that kind of job and it's not that kind of pond. It's certainly strong enough to make sure the rocks aren't going to move or fall into the pond. And as I say, because these stones are already solid, flat-bottomed and sitting nice and firmly, just making sure that they're held into place is all that's required. It's messy stuff. Wear your gloves. I've got some on my arms. That'll be here till next week. A bit of WD-40 when I get home tonight will probably clean most of that off, but it sticks to your clothes, it sticks to everything, so be careful. Now once you've done that and you've left it to harden for half an hour or so, and it's started to ooze out of all of the cracks and the joints, you can start to clean it up and tidy it up. Areas like this can be broken off, and then the other bits and pieces can just be pushed in and manipulated into the cracks and the joints to conceal it and hide it. Now what's really nice about this stuff is that it cures with a slightly rough surface, and it allows moss and algae and other bits and pieces very quickly to start to grow on it. So it doesn't take very long for any visible bits to just green up and look like the rest of the stone. It really just looks like solidified lava like this, doesn't it? With that skin on. Right. Well, we've got a lot of fixing to do, and then we've got to crack on and start doing the rest of the cascade. See you on the next part.